Well, joining us now are Yasir Naqvi, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health, Larry Brock, the Conservative MP for Brantford Brant in Ontario, and Taylor Bachrach, NDP Transport Critic. Hello to the three of you.
Hello, Michael.
Good afternoon.
Listen, Larry, I'm going to begin with you here. You know, your party's motion here, it essentially calls on the government to outline all the money that's been spent, contracted out, associated with the ArriveCan app. But to hear it from the Auditor General herself, that's nearly an impossible task because there was such poor record keeping. Is this just a political stunt?
Absolutely not, Michael. I think the Auditor General was very fair with parliamentarians and Canadians. It was a guess on her part that this was $60 million. It could have been much more. She could not investigate the amount of money that was delivered to subcontractors. The government is in a position to do that. The government's also in a position to determine exactly how much was paid out to the federal public service. So when you take a look at those three entities, the amount of $60 million is probably at the low threshold. It could be substantially more. So this Conservative motion is to determine the exact, as best we can, the exact number and not just rely upon a guess. The government has the ability to look into this a little more closer than perhaps the Auditor General could have done. The other concern that we have is that there was missing documents. And whether those missing documents are simply as a result of having no documentation at all, or whether or not that documentation was maliciously deleted. Again, the government is in the best position to determine that particular answer, and we're looking forward to receiving that information.
Okay, so a pretty big question being asked. You know, Yasir, I'm going to bring you in here because I want to read to you, and this is verbatim, what is written right now in a Conservative news release that came out today. And it says, quote, "Millions of taxpayer dollars were wasted by the Trudeau government officials who rigged the contracting process for their friends." Now, that's the case that the Conservatives are making here, their explanation for this $80,000 expense that ballooned out to nearly $60 million. What do you say to that kind of description from the Conservative Party?
I mean, that language is nothing but political rhetoric. Look, we're really thankful to the Auditor General for the report she's done and the recommendations she's put forward. And we from the outside have said that the findings in that Auditor General's report are unacceptable. That kind of misappropriation of rules should not happen. Procurement rules are there to ensure that contracting is done in a fair manner. And even though that we were living through a pandemic times where the health of Canadians was paramount, it does not justify any violation of the rules. And for that reason, the government has been very active through CBSA, through PSPC, government departments who are responsible for these things to make sure that proper investigation takes place. If our CMP is investigating into these matters, then make sure that those investigations continue and come to a logical conclusion. And lastly, to strengthen the rules as per the recommendations of the Auditor General so something like this does not happen again.
Okay, I hear that, but you know, at the end of the day, though, it was your government that was in charge, and at some point the buck has to stop somewhere. How do you explain it? How do you and your colleagues talk about this when you look at this dollar figure, again, that ballooned out to so much more than what the original estimate was?
We take our responsibility very seriously, and like I said at the outset, it's really disturbing to see the findings of the Auditor General. And even though we were dealing with a serious health emergency in terms of the pandemic, and there was a lot of unknowns, it does not justify such a cost. And that's why the government is absolutely determined that if there were rules that were violated, that there are consequences associated with it, and to make sure that something like this does not happen again.
Mr. Brock, how do you respond to that? Because you know your party has been very clear. You're calling this a scam.
Well, is that to me?
That's you.
No, that's to me. Thank you, Michael. Well, it is a scam. It is a scandal at the highest level. One thing we're not talking about, in fact, this was just the part of my speech in the House literally 10, 15 minutes ago, is where was the ministerial oversight for the last 3 years to allow this scandal to creep up to 60 million plus? Where was the Minister of Health? Why wasn't the Minister of Health overseeing this? Why wasn't the ministers, all the ministers, Public Safety, Minister of Health, Minister of Procurement, why weren't they asking questions? Why were they not trying to keep a tab on these runaway costs. So at the end of the day, ministerial responsibility is not being discussed, and it should. The government is talking about the public service, that if there were some bad actors, they're going to be held accountable. But I think they have to hold themselves to a higher standard because, as you said, Michael, the buck stops with the government.
Mr. Bachrach, Taylor, what's your response to that?
Well, absolutely, there needs to be accountability. This lands squarely on the government's desk. The fact that the ArriveCan app cost $60 million is entirely unacceptable. And if you read the Auditor General's report, it's deeply troubling. The way that this was mismanaged. But there are two things going on here. First of all, there's the misconduct around the procurement process, and that needs to be fully investigated. But the other thing is that ArriveCan is only the tip of the iceberg. What the real big issue is here is the ballooning of contracts to government insiders, which has happened both under Conservative and Liberal governments. We've seen this outsourcing of public service work just skyrocket over the past number of years. Before the pandemic, $119 million was spent on the big six consulting firms. Last year, over $470 million. So this is absolutely out of control. It started with the Harper government gutting the capacity of the public service to do the basic work of government. And this Liberal government has seen that outsourcing to their corporate friends just increase beyond what anyone could have possibly imagined. That's the big challenge here, and we want to get to the bottom of that, despite other parties not being willing to look at what those numbers actually are and how it got so bad. The Canadian public deserves value for their tax dollars, and what we've seen with ArriveCan is that there's this whole gravy train of consultants that are making money hand over fist, charging commissions for work that doesn't seem to actually be done over and over again, to the point where the actual value to the public is a fraction of what it should be. That's what people should be really concerned about, and that's what we're going to get to the bottom of.
Okay, I'm hearing you on that one, Taylor, but I'm wondering what, if any, responsibility your party takes on this, because to hear for the Conservatives, not to speak for Larry Brock here, but they pointed to the NDP as supporting the expenditures surrounding the ArriveCan app.
Well, they like to point to these omnibus budget and supply bills as being some sort of gotcha moment. The reality is that those bills also included public health spending that was vitally important during a global health emergency. But the reality is that if you trace it back, this goes back to Conservative and Liberal governments that have underfunded the public service, that have outsourced government work to their corporate friends, and there's this whole ecosystem of people, well-connected folks in Ottawa, that are getting these lucrative contracts. They're charging commissions, they're subcontracting the work out to another company. Sometimes there's commissions going 3 subcontracts deep. We think there are examples where up to 50% of the total final expenditure is going to these commissions that don't actually relate to any honest work on the product that is delivered for the Canadian public. That's something that Canadians should be extremely concerned about. It's not the way it's supposed to be done. What we need is to rebuild the public service so that they're able to do the basic work of running this country. And we need to get back to a place where Canadians can expect their government to deliver good value for the public funds. Okay,
listen, I want to play a clip here because, there were also questions posed today about the RCMP investigation into all this. For people at home who did not catch that, take a listen to what we heard today in the House.
Today, Conservatives got a letter from the Commissioner of the RCMP indicating that the National Police Force is now formally investigating the Arrive scam and the Auditor General's report into it. Now, we know that the Auditor General the government deprived the Auditor General of key documents to calculate the full cost and the breadth of the scandal. We also know that the Prime Minister refused to hand over documents in the SNC-Lavalin and the Aga Khan Island scandals. Will the Prime Minister commit here and now to giving the RCMP all the documents and evidence on Arrive scam?
Okay, Larry, I'll get you to pick up there. Are you really concerned here? There is an RCMP investigation that was actually confirmed by the Commissioner today in committee. Are you really concerned that the PMO or the government will not cooperate with this investigation?
100%, Michael. As my leader had indicated in the clip that you just played, the Prime Minister hid behind cabinet confidentiality with respect to the Aga Khan vacation. And we had the RCMP Commissioner today to talk about the SNC-Lavalin. The SNC-Lavalin investigation, literally for about 4.5 years, came to an abrupt halt when the Prime Minister refused to expand or broaden the release of documents and or hid behind cabinet confidentiality. The RCMP Commissioner made it abundantly clear that with the evidence they were able to receive from the Prime Minister and the PMO's office, including the testimony of Jody Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General, as well as the Ethics Commissioner report, that did not meet the mens rea component to the offence of obstruction of justice. He made it abundantly clear, had the Prime Minister waived all the confidences, been truly transparent and accountable, as he promised Canadians he would be in 2015, they would have been able to make a determination as to whether or not they had sufficient and probable grounds to lay a charge against Justin Trudeau.
Taylor, what are your concerns? Do you have any on this one?
Well, I think the fact that the RCMP is investigating the allegations of wrongdoing when it comes to the ArriveCan app should concern everyone, and they need every document and every source of information in order to conduct their investigation, and the Canadian public deserves answers. And if there is misconduct and wrongdoing that's taken place, the people involved need to be held fully accountable. So we support that process, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Yasir, last word to you. Again, concerns being expressed here by the Conservatives as to how forthright the Prime Minister, his office, and your government is actually going to be.
Well, listen, I think everybody knows here, I think Canadians know this, that police is independent of government. They do their investigation independently of the government. In the end of the day, the Prime Minister does not direct the RCMP, nor he directs any police investigation that takes place. In fact, to comment on any ongoing police investigation will be wrong on part of any government official. So if RCMP is looking into this matter, if there was wrongdoings, then we should let them do their investigation, and they have the best tools available in order to determine if any laws were broken or not.
But will your government fully cooperate with any investigation should it be called upon?
We've always cooperated with any police investigation, and we will continue to do so. But we will also not pretend that we are somehow directing the RCMP, because that is not the role of the government. It's up to them to do that independent investigation.
Okay, well, we continue to watch. Thank you for the time, the three of you, to Yasir Naqvi, Larry Brock, and Taylor Bachrach. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.